Jude the Obscure is the last finished novel by Thomas Hardy. The setting, like many of his novels, is in Wessex. During his time, there was this new idea of modernism and coming of controversial ideas of science that seemed to be contradicting with religion. Throughout the novel, we find that Jude and Sue are typical Thomas Hardy characters who struggle for their passion against social conventions and also fail in the process. Thomas Hardy himself regarded the novel as the tragedy of unfulfilled aims. The mood in this novel, like most other Thomas Hardy novels, is one of this illusioned, real, pragmatic pessimism. He refuses to see life in an unrealistic, optimistic, happily ever after kind of philosophy. The story begins with the protagonist Jude Fawley when he was 11 years old. He lived in a small village called Mary Green. Right from the title itself, we get the idea that Jude is not going to be a happy man, because obscure means unknown, unimportant, confused, and uncertain. As a child, he was hired by Mr. Trottham, the owner of a cornfield, to chase away the birds. At first, he was doing a great job in chasing away those birds that were trying to pick on the corn, but later he realized that these birds are doing nothing wrong. Why then should they be chased away? They're just unwanted just like Jude himself. Unwanted by his parents, unwanted by the society, and even unwanted by Aunt Drusilla. Aunt Drusilla was a baker, and in fact she can't wait when Jude would grow up and leave her alone. So he pities the birds and allows them to pick on some corn, but was caught by Mr. Trottham, and Jude was chased away for his bad work, because as the narrator says, what was good for God's birds were bad for God's gardener. Jude was inspired by his teacher, Mr. Phillotson, who had left Mary Green to pursue his higher degree in Christminster. This made Jude interested to know more about Christminster. He innocently wanted to be a scholar. He asked everyone about Christminster. Everyone he heard from said nice and wonderful things about the place. It was called the place where the tree of knowledge grew. The tree of knowledge, as you might have guessed, is the phrase taken from the Bible to denote the tree on which the forbidden fruit grew. The temptation that led Adam and Eve to commit the original sin in Eden Garden. Jude was so intrigued and determined to go to Christminster, for which he diligently studied Greek and Latin from the books that he received from Mr. Phillotson. He worked as a stonemason, and whenever he got time, he studied classical Greek and Latin. There was nobody to teach him, so he was self-taught. And whenever he got the chance, he would climb up the mountain and look into the direction where people said Christminster was, and look at the lights that came from Christminster. Sometimes it was visible, sometimes it was not, but he would stare at it and dream about a bright future. Christminster for him was a city of light, knowledge, freedom, and everything he desired in life. Everything that was out of his league. Yes, Christminster meant everything to him until he met Arabella, until he was infatuated by Arabella. Arabella Donn was a simple girl, the daughter of a pig farmer. She was associated with alcohol and sexual pleasures. She's so determined and passionate, but not determined and passionate towards a career or a permanent goal, but just to find a man who can provide for her and satisfy her. Arabella may be a simple, uneducated daughter of a pig farmer with shallow character, but she is free, practical, manipulative, and cunning character. When Jude wanted to leave her and pursue his dreams of going to Christminster, she somehow tricked him into believing that she was pregnant and made Jude marry her. Thomas Hardy uses the symbol of Samson and Delilah to portray the relationship between Jude and Arabella Donn. In the Bible, we read that Samson fell in love with Delilah and let his emotions rule over his ambition. Similarly, in case of Jude, on hearing that Arabella was pregnant, He let his emotions crush his dreams and ambition of going to Christminster. But soon he found out that Arabella was faking her looks, was dishonest about her past, and even lying about her pregnancy. In her clarification, she only says that everyone resorts to deception to get the man that they want. Everyone does that. On their wedding night, she took off her artificial hair, and Jude was shocked to realize that it was fake hair. He was also shocked to hear that she was a bartender in the past, and also she had not been living with her parents for 3 years. He was all the more disappointed to know that she was not even pregnant. And as she puts it, it was a mistake. She was not even ashamed or sorry for lying to her husband Jude. Jude and Arabella fattened a pig, and when the person who had to butcher the fattened pig did not come, they tried to handle it themselves, and Jude wanted to kill the pig in a quick and painless way, but Arabella wanted the pig to bleed. According to her, the pig should slowly bleed for around 5 minutes and then die slowly for the meat to taste good. This idea of killing the pig also mirrors how Jude's life would end in his relationship with Arabella. It was a disastrous marriage, obviously, and Jude tried to commit suicide by jumping into the lake 3 times. But the ice on the frozen lake did not break. Though he tried to jump into the lake and die, the ice did not break. So his attempt to end his own life failed. But when he returned home, he found out that Arabella had moved to Australia with her parents. Now that his wife is gone, it gave him hope that he can go and pursue his dream of being in Christminster. He happily sent Arabella some money and allowed her to stay with her parents. Jude left Marygreen and went to Christminster. He imagined that it would be a welcoming city and with new opportunities. But on reaching there, he realized that Christminster was a place of the elite. In reality, Christminster was a place for the upper class, rich background, and the civilized class of people. He approached 4 professors to help him, but they only told him that Christminster was not a place for a person like him. And though he learned Greek and Latin, it was all self-taught, and he had no certificate of degree to make him acceptable in Christminster. They also advised him that a person like him should stick to stonemasonry. Jude also found out that even his teacher, Mr. Richard Phillotson, did not get admitted to Christminster. But Richard Phillotson was still working as a teacher and was looking for an assistant. When Jude came to Christminster for the first time, he did not know anybody. He only knew that his school teacher, Richard Phillotson, would be in Christminster, and his cousin Sue Brighthead would be there. She was sophisticated, witty, non-religious, and non-conventional, because as soon as he heard her cousin Jude was in Christminster, she goes to meet him. Though in the conventional way, Jude should come and meet her because she is a woman. Sue met Jude, and Jude found Sue very attractive, but tried to keep his feelings inside, because technically he was still married to Arabella, and also Sue was his cousin. He introduced Sue to Mr. Phillotson, who was looking for an assistant, and soon Mr. Phillotson fell in love with Sue and wanted to marry her. Jude and Sue also developed a romantic feeling for each other, but Sue Brighthead went on to marry Mr. Phillotson, who was 20 years older than her, because she was mad at Jude for being married to Arabella and keeping it a secret. However, Sue was not happy in her marriage to Mr. Phillotson, and so she goes back to live with Jude. On the other hand, Mr. Phillotson just allows her to go and live with Jude. Soon Arabella sends a boy to Jude saying that the boy was his son and that she was married to another man in Australia. And poor Jude here remained faithful to Arabella and could not even confess his love to Sue Bridehead, though as we know Sue was his cousin, of course. Something I find unbelievable is how these women characters like Sue Bridehead and Arabella Donn makes the rules. They come and go and get things done as they please, and the male characters like Jude and Mr. Phillotson, and later on even the physician Wilbert, just gets along with whatever the female characters plan or female characters lead. The male characters we find are like puppets in the hand of the female characters. After all, Thomas Hardy's women are quite intimidating. Mr. Phillotson married Sue Bridehead, but when she felt uninterested and wanted to go and live with Jude, he just allows. And that's why the society criticized him. And also the society, of course, criticized Jude and Sue Bridehead living together without marrying. In the meantime, Arabella sends Jude's son. Sue Bridehead comes to live with Jude Fawley and then says that, oh, I want to live with you, but I don't want to get married. And Jude is okay with it. And they call Jude and Arabella's son Little Father Time, because right from his birth, he looked like a matured person. He had a matured person's personality. He had a matured person's characteristic. They not only raise Little Father Time, but Jude and Sue have 2 more children out of wedlock, and Sue is pregnant again with the 3rd child. Little Father Time is named so because he had a serious, depressed look. He represents the dark, harsh realities of life. Little Father Time also witnesses how Sue and Jude tries to fit into the society that rejects them. Jude and Sue were frowned upon in Christminster because they were financially very weak. The relationship of divorcing their spouses and living together and not getting married, it made them socially and religiously unacceptable. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with Sue Bridehead and Jude Fawley. Their relationship reminds us of the struggles of trying to break free from the old traditions and conventional ways, but being unsuccessful. Because in spite of all their efforts and trying to hang on in the society, they still remain unwanted people in the society, the trash of the society. Sue gives up. And Sue, being Jude's only reason to hold on, Sue's breaking down breaks Jude. By this time, Jude's health was already deteriorating. Little Father Time sees whatever crisis Jude and Sue were facing, financial crisis, social rejection, religious disapproval. He sees them begging from door to door, begging in and out for help. He tells Sue that he wishes he had never been born. He believes that he and the other 2 children are the reason why Sue and Jude had to suffer so much. He also believed that if they did not exist, Sue and Jude would have a better life. And one night he hangs himself to death and hangs the other 2 children as well, leaving a misspelled note written, "Done because we are too many." The sight of the death of her children and the death of Little Father Time brings a disastrous turning point in the life of Sue and Jude as well. Both Jude and Sue seems to be devoured by life, tradition, society, religion after this event. Sue believes that it is her punishment for leaving her husband, Mr. Phillotson, and coming to live with Jude and having 2 children out of wedlock. Sue, who was also pregnant at that time, had a miscarriage. And saying that it was her punishment, she leaves Jude and goes to live with her husband, Richard Phillotson. And Richard Phillotson goes back with Sue Bridehead to Mary Green to continue being a teacher. Jude hopelessly still dreams about getting into Christminster, a place of hope and light for him. But life and fate only shows him that he is only meant to be the dirt of the society. And no matter how much he tries, happiness is not what he deserves. He's not meant to be with an intellectual person like Sue Bridehead, but an alcoholic and seductress like Arabella. Arabella married Cartlet after marrying Jude, but Cartlet soon died. So, hunting for another man, she comes to seduce Jude once more. She gets Jude so drunk and makes him promise to marry her again, remarry her. Now the city of Christminster was about to celebrate its Remembrance Day. Remembrance Day, the grandest festival, full of light, celebration, games and fun. And Jude's health was getting worse. There was this doctor, Dr. Wilbert, who comes to regularly check on Jude. But this physician Wilbert comes to check on his wife Arabella, more than to check on Jude. Arabella flirts with this physician because, you know, Jude might die anytime soon, so she might need another man. And when the big celebration of Remembrance Day came, there were going to be intellectuals and founders of Christminster and scholars gathered with the public to celebrate the big day. Physician Wilbert invites Arabella to go and see the boat racing. And Arabella, of course, accepted the invitation, leaving Jude to die alone in his room. Christminster that Jude admired and adored and worshipped his whole life is unaware of his pathetic death. Arabella finds him dead, but that of course does not stop her from going out to see the boat racing with the physician Wilbert. In fact, when she comes and checks on Jude and sees that he was not breathing and that he was not alive, she just said, "To think that he should die just now. Why should he die just now?" And then she just covers Jude's body with a blanket, a cloth, and then goes out to enjoy herself. And with Jude being dead alone, while Christminster is in all its glory celebrating its Remembrance Day, as we see in Jude's character, Hardy saw little hope for man as an individual. Hardy portrays his character just as mere plaything of fate. He portrays his protagonist, his characters, just as a toy for destiny, a toy for fate. And like the case of Jude Fawley, his characters or his protagonist often stumble upon sequence of accidents, accident after accident, which at the end leads to the most dire consequences. And that brings us to the end of the discussion of Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.